years.
Okay guys, we're back in the shop after about a little over a month hiatus, and so I haven't really gotten too much accomplished, but I did get a couple of things done that I want to show you that I've been working on. When my granddaughter was here, I actually got a little bit done. She helped me out a little bit. So one thing I had worked on, I'll show you my drawing here. This is the drawing for the AC DC variable power high voltage power supply. Okay, so when we look at this, here's the neutral and the hot coming in from the variac that's going to be powered from the circuit breaker, the electronic circuit breaker. I've got it coming to a switch that's going to switch between the AC and the DC. If it goes to AC, it's going to come up here to my AC outlet, and it will be being powered by the variac. So it'll be variable AC power coming to the outlet here, as well as my AC out plugs. I have the AC voltmeter and amp meter tied into that. If I flip the switch, then it directs the variac to the transformer. Get you in the screen here, sorry. It directs it from the transformer to my filter that I've got here. That's basically, as you can see, consistent of the two 220 microfarad electrolytics, the 330K resistors, and this 162K 4-watt resistor that I've got here. And so then those come down and power up my DC out. So that's the schematic I've been working off of. Now let's take a look at what I built. It's not the cleanest in the world thing I've ever built, but I'm happy with it. So I used 2 resistors in parallel to get my 4 watts on that 162. And there's the 330, the two 330s, and then of course the 2 electrolytics. So that's all put together, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this in fish paper. As you can see, I got fish paper between the diode array and the rest of it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this whole thing in fish paper. But before we do that, I want to test it. And so I had built this block to house it. Kind of like Doug had his block. This is my block. And it will screw down on the wood section. And I actually have 2 different lids because one lid was just a little looser than I wanted it to be. This one goes right on, and it's got a little wiggle to it, which it would have been okay, but I decided I wanted one to fit a little bit better, so I made another one and downsized it slightly. This one fits nice. I have to shove it down to put it on, and it's not coming off. I mean, it'll come off. I try and get it off, but it's not coming off just by pulling it off. So that's that. So once I get it wrapped in fish paper, it'll just sit down in there like that. I'll drill some holes in my lid to feed my wires through, and then that'll screw down. But for now, I want to hook this up to my transformer and to my variac, which I'm not using the little variac and the actual MFP because none of that's wired yet. I'm just going to run the wires from my upper variac that I have up there on the shelf, which you can't see, but that's where we're going to run it from. Let me get you zoomed in a little bit here, and I'll get it wired up. Okay, so I got you guys zoomed in so you can see the meter. I'm going to flip on, well, let's turn on the meter first. Got it on DC volts. I'm going to flip on my AC variac up here. I just flipped it on. I don't have it where you can actually see the voltage on the variac, but I can tell you what the voltage is on the variac. See where I can see it. So right there is 10 volts on the variac, and you can see at 10 volts on the variac we're up to 87 volts DC. on up to 20 volts. And here's 20 volts. AC, we got 187 volts DC. There's 30 volts. You can see we're up to 277 on the DC. Let's take it up to 40 volts. There's about 331 DC. Take it on up to 50 volts. 50 volts, we're at 397. 60 volts, we're about 462 volts DC. Go to 70 volts, we're up to about 520 on the DC. I'm not going to go much higher than that right now. I don't think I'll be using that high ever. This particular transformer will go up to about 750. So that's where we are. So now I'm going to back this back down on the variac. Hopefully my arm's not in your way. And back it back down. Alright, so the variac's back down to 0 now. It's dropping back down pretty quickly. Go ahead and turn the variac off. Variac is off. And you see we're dropping back down. So the actual transformer high voltage DC is working according to plan. So that's good. We'll let that drop on off, and I can drill my holes in my cover and get those wires run, and then it'll be ready to place on the wood in the back. That's all in there now. Put the wires up. I'll line everything up here. And that should be it. And there it is. And it ain't coming out of that. That's good, but I can take it off if I want to at some point. It's not coming off of there on its own. So, good. So that's it. So that's the DC filter supply. DC outs and the transformer in. So that's that. Okay, now I'll show you something else that I just got through making the other day on my 3D printer. So I made this housing. Remember I told you I was going to have a variable power supply in case the fixed voltage that I have down there weren't enough. So I had gotten myself another 5 amp buck converter. Right there. And when I printed this with the intention that it's going to be sitting up here somewhere along here like this, so that I can adjust it easy enough. Well, when I printed this out, I wasn't paying attention. I was thinking that was the top. It's not the top. It goes like this. So, needless to say, that wasn't going to work. So, come version 2. Version 2, I've got it flipped around. I've got the holes lined up so that I can put it in there. It's got the recess, you can see that where it drops down. I left enough that I can have 2 of the standoffs screwed together to keep everything else away from it. So it goes in here like this. Put it in here. I left enough room for my wires. I don't know if I've seen that in the light very good, but there it is. And I left myself a hole for the adjustment screw for adjusting the voltage. So that'll all screw together, and then that's going to mount up here somewhere in this vicinity, wherever I decide I want to put it. Because I'm going to have a flat piece of wood, which let me show you, I've got that now too. So I got this 1/4 inch piece of birch that is going to mount up here. Get my drill out of the way so I can hold it up there. it's going to mount up here something like that. Not that low, but slightly. I'll have to notch it slightly and get it partially up so I can slide it forward and then down and mount up there, and then I can have that. And that gives me additional room. I want to add something else later as well, because this is pretty much filled up at this point. So that's ready to kind of put together. I'm getting to the point that I need to strip this thing back down so I can paint it, so I can start hooking things up. Another thing I did, I'm gonna get to, I can turn you and show you this. Remember, I got all the little switch panels made, like this one, right? And this one, and this one, and this one. Unfortunately, what I found out was when I butted them all up side by side, because they each have their own mounting post area to screw onto that, it didn't leave enough room. There's one more, it's not up here right now, but one more that I had drilled out for the signal tracer. Speaker there for the signal tracer, right there for the signal tracer. So when you bought all those together, there wasn't enough room. So I went back to the drawing board. This time I made it out of black. I made a long one, and then I made another not as long one. And these, if I drill them, actually are enough to fit and actually still have about an inch between them. So now what I got to do is go ahead and drill all these to mount all the stuff in them that I've got currently in this. I made a brace in the middle of each of them so it will be more secure, and I made the fronts a little thicker so they'll be a little bit more secure, because everything's going to be going in that. And I think that the black will stand out against that, and the silver there, you know, obviously will be there, and this is obviously silver as well. So I think I'm going to do silver hammer paint, and then I'll get these all drilled and remounted. And then I think the next step that I'm going to do is start putting the electronic circuit breaker together. I got to get all this painted and such figured out first, and then I'll get the electronic circuit breaker, and then it'll be time to start putting it all back together. And it's kind of like when you watch these guys build the motorcycles and they fab it all up and they tear it all down so they can send it out and get it painted and chromed and stuff. Same thing here. I'm fabbing this all up, and then I'll tear it all down, send it out for paint, and then I'll start putting it all back together again and wiring everything up the way it's supposed to be wired up. Other thing I still have to do is I've got to cut out this whole bottom. You notice I had some X's and stuff, if you can see that. Lines and X's, that was telling me where I needed to cut out, where I wanted to leave for stiffening, stuff like that. So these would have the spots to screw in. Well, now I need to refigure it for these spots and the center supports for that. And I got to cut that out. Well, I got to have the stuff off to cut it out. So that's kind of why I said I'm going to probably strip all this out as my next step. And then once I get that done, I can send it out for paint. I'll show you what I actually have been doing here. I painted the main body of it in the silver hammer paint. I painted the two ends in black, and I got the baseboard painted as well. I haven't made the rear wood yet. That's more of a cover, other than setting the one voltage regulator on top. And then here are the new plates populated right here. They turn out really well. This one is DC out, AC out, switch for AC DC. Then we have all of this one is going to be the variable voltage one. Here's the common, and then the miscellaneous voltage that my regulator board assembly, which I don't have sitting over here right at the moment, we'll go on to, and the switch turns that on and off. In the back one here, we have the signal chaser on-off switch, indicator light, and B and C jack. And then here we have the signal tracer, and it's the B and D signal tracer. So everything is getting close to being ready to start buttoning up and putting everything back together again. Now I am ready, while I wait for my paint to dry for a few days, because I don't want to get it going too soon and have the paint get boogered up. I'm going to go ahead and get started on the electronic circuit breaker. So that'll be next. Let me get the bench cleaned off and ready for that, and we'll be back. Okay everyone, as promised, I've got my bench cleaned off and I am ready to start building the circuit board for the electronic circuit breaker. This is the Glass Slinger / Telefunken electronic circuit breaker, and if you go to Telefunken's page, you can find it on his site, as well as, and he created the version that I'm working on here with the circuit board, and then he based that on the one at Glass Slinger's site. So both those videos can be found on their sites. So just a quick look here. I look at the board in the holder where I'm going to be working on it, and then a couple things I wanted to show you guys. Of course, I've got a schematic right here for it. But what I did earlier today was I got my part list all together. This saves me from having to find the stuff as I'm building it. I've already listed it. I've got it taped to the piece of paper here, all of my individual parts, so I can easily find them and get them populated fairly quickly, as well as I took a picture of the board and copied it and made it bigger so that I can see it on this to better visualize it on that, because I can't really read that well. I will have my magnifier that I'll be using. So let's go ahead and we'll get some stuff populated here. Soldering iron heated up. I've got my solder sitting here. I've got my magnifier here. And we're going to start populating with the low parts first, which is going to be the resistors. And we're going to start with the 10K resistor R2. Got it right here on my sheet, like that. And we're going to put it on the board where it belongs. See to get it on there. I am actually looking through the magnifier and still having a little bit of trouble seeing through there. So there is R2. Now we'll do R3, which is a 1K resistor. Get a couple of them on here and then we'll flip it over and solder them. Okay, and then we got R4, which is a 10K. So we got R2, R3, R4, and R5 is a 680. Is right here. So let me get the 680. Alright, so that's R2, R3, R4, and R5 populated. I do have an R6 and I do have an R7, but I'm not going to populate R6 and R7 right now, because those resistors set the top end and the bottom end of the current trip points, and I'm going to put some temporary potentiometers in there once I get this built so I can get it where I want it. I want it to trip the way it's set up right now. The way the parts that I got from Telefunken is, it's going to trip between 200 milliamps and about 7 amps, and I want to get that down a little bit lower to about 100 milliamps to maybe 3 amps. So I'll have to play around with that. I do have an R8 that I'm going to go ahead and populate. And R8 goes right here. And I see it have an R9 next to it as well. So I might as well do that one as well. Get R9 off the board. Not a board, it's a piece of paper actually, but it works quite well. And then that'll be it for the resistors, and I'll go ahead and solder these in and trim my tails. And there we go. Alright, so let's flip this on over. Let's see if we can go ahead and get these soldered up. Alright. I'll put a little bit of drip of flux on these. Liquid flux. Actually works good for PCB boards as long as I don't get too much on there. And it's wanting to come out pretty darn fast. I wind up having to clean that board up. I don't like using flux on the board, but it just makes it so much easier to solder. I think I had a little bit of too much in the nozzle there. Alright, now let's do this. Okay, I think I got all those. Alright, I'm not going to bore you guys with sitting here watching me solder all this, so I'm just going to go ahead and continue populating the board. I'm going to clean this remaining flux off of here, and I'm going to continue populating. Okay, so here we are, or here's where we are with this electronic circuit breaker board. So in hindsight, obviously this, and this, I put them on the board backward. And I decided that it was going to cause more damage me trying to heat everything back up and get this back off than it would be to just put my wires in, route my wires properly, put them in. I'll just spin 90 on there, put them all in. I may still reverse this one because it got this cap in the way of it. But I had to order more of these. And those aren't going to be here probably for at least a week, along with the 2 pots that I have to use to get these 2 resistors set. So there's not much more I can do with this. As you can see, I do have the transformer on. I did get my current transformer on there as well. So this board is pretty much built, and there's not much more I can do. I got these on. So what I'm going to do is set this aside until the other parts come in, and go ahead and start putting the actual MFP back together again. It's had a few days to dry since I painted it all, and I got to get it all back together again so then I can start putting all this stuff in here. So that's where we're going to stop on the right now for the electronic circuit breaker, and then when I get the MFP back in here, I'll go ahead and drill the holes and mount the switches in the pot for the current and the cycles for this, and we'll go from there. And so apparently once I get the MFP all put back together again, we'll go ahead and probably end this particular part, and then in the final part we'll get this tested and get the rest of it all wired up. And that's going to be the plan. So let me get this off the bench and we'll get the MFP back in here and put it back together again. Okay, so here we are back. We got the MFP back on the bench from out in the garage where I painted it last week. And I'm going to start putting everything back on the front of it, and we'll see how that comes out. I'll bring it back intermittently. I'm not going to make you watch me put this all back together again, but I'll throw some of it together, I'll come back, I'll show you, and then keep going like that. Okay, I told you I'd bring you back as I start getting it together, and I got it, some more of it together. I got the decibel meter and jacks back in place, and the speaker, and that's what it's looking like so far. So I'll keep working down the line there, and we'll come back. Okay, so as promised, I've got it back together again. Now obviously I don't have anything wired in the back other than over here my decibel meter and those jacks. I've got those wired, I've got this wired. It turned out pretty good. I'm very happy with the appearance of it. I still have to put my electronic circuit breaker right here. I'm going to have a main power switch, and then I've got this switch that's going to be to control the cycles that it trips at, and I've got this potentiometer that's going to be the current limit pot. So depending upon where I set the current limit here and the number of cycles will be determined when it trips. I'm going to drill a couple holes for these here. I'm probably going to put the power switch here, the main power switch, the indicator lights and the trip button up here. So it'll have a trip button and 3 lights, one that says it's on, one that says it's good, and one that says it's tripped. And those will all go in this vicinity right here. These pots will be down here, the switch will be here, and then the indicator lights will be up there. So that's the plan. I'm going to get those drilled and in place, and I'll bring you back. So I'll take you down here. So this is the current limit knob pot. This is the cycle switch. This is the power indicator. This is the trip light. It's the pilot, and there's a reset button. So that's what that is. That's pretty much what it's going to look like on the outside, other than I've got that variable power supply I'm going to put on the top. But I think I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. I think this is the perfect place to end this video here. And in the next part, we'll go ahead and start getting everything wired up properly in the back. So